Well, welcome to the kickoff for the, I was going to say City Dock, for the Maritime Task Force. We're delighted you are all with us today to share your insights and to take on this very important task. I'd like to now have Mayor Buckley welcome everyone officially.
So welcome everybody and thank you. This is how we get stuff done. We get everybody around the table. We look each other in the eye. We have an open and honest and transparent dialogue. And doing that is how we've been so successful to move things along in the city. I think really once we're communicating with each other, we understand each other, we can make big things happen. Welcome to the kickoff of the Maritime Task Force. In my 2017 transition report, I committed to celebrating our maritime industry and ensuring there would be a strong and healthy future for our working maritime businesses in Annapolis. This need has become more urgent and it is reflected in Alderman Arnett's resolution establishing the Maritime Task Force. As the maritime industry has evolved, we must make sure that the city is providing a nurturing business environment, which is important for the industry to not only survive, but to also thrive. We can prioritize the Annapolis maritime industry by protecting what is unique and authentic about our working waterfront, by also providing opportunity for new blue technology and other state-of-the-art industries, and by facilitating new and existing maritime businesses as they seek to expand along our waterfront. Equally important is my commitment to ensuring that all Annapolitans have access to our waterfront and can enjoy use of our creeks, whether they be sailing, kayaking, fishing, paddleboarding, or simply walking along the water to take in the views. People who don't have access or don't use the water, they don't have the same investment. It is easier to care about something when you use it, when you have a true appreciation for it. We have a tremendous opportunity through this task force to work directly with the National Park Service to develop a strategy for our entire community to connect to the water that surrounds us all. I want to thank Wendy O'Sullivan, Superintendent of the Chesapeake Bay National Park Service, for offering to work with us as we find new ways for Annapolitans to experience life on the water. As we kick off this first meeting, I want to thank each of you for volunteering your time and expertise to ensure that working together, this effort will succeed. That is a big thank you from us at the city and a big thank you from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Alderman Arnett is here. I'm not sure if Alderwoman Tierney or Alderman Savage are here, but Alderman Arnett, do you have a couple words to share with us?
I do. They will be brief as you directed. And if for those of you who don't know, when Eileen asks, you will comply. So, of course, like the mayor, I welcome you and thank you. This is the culmination of a long legislative process and the beginning of what I hope is a very productive process to give us some insights and recommendations on the maritime across the board. And this is a very truly impressive group. I'm very happy we could get all of you to agree to participate. Eileen has a long, successful history of running large groups like this, so you're in good hands. And now I would say that it's time to get to work. We look forward to, we being the Planning Commission and the City Council, we look forward to receiving your recommendations and carrying them forward through the legislative process. Is that brief enough?
Thank you so much. Our city manager has some comments for us.
Thank you, Eileen, and hello to everybody. First, I want to thank Eileen for taking this on. You know, this is sort of the curse of the highly competent to keep getting these over and over and over, and she is definitely highly competent. So thank you, Eileen, for taking this on. I'd like to echo the mayor and Alderman Arnett's comments. Thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules to help us with this. Obviously we're hand selected for this, so we really appreciate your participation. You all have the opportunity to help us secure the future of our working waterfront, not only for the maritime businesses, but also for our community and residents as well. These maritime districts, due to the land-intensive nature of the boatyards and sailing clubs and marinas, afford residents unobstructed views of the creeks and the open bay, which we may not have otherwise if it were a different type of development, and which really serves our residents well. The maritime districts have been successful in keeping our waterfront open so everyone can enjoy the water just by walking past these properties. As part of the comprehensive planning process, this task force will help define the future for the Annapolis waterfront. So it's important that you seek to balance the varying interests, and we trust that you will do that, whether it be business, property owners, or residents, to ensure that our maritime industry has a strong and secure future, that maritime properties can continue to support our boating industry, and that our entire community can connect to and experience our working waterfront. As you all probably know, there's been numerous studies that have taken place over the past 30 years, but now is the ideal time for this task force and for us to take action. We're moving forward with design and construction of the new city dock with a world-class public space at our waterfront, which will help secure Annapolis's future as the East Coast premier location for recreational boating. Now we have the opportunity to protect the future of our boating industry as well in Annapolis, and also the opportunity to partner with the National Park Service to connect visitors and residents to this great national treasure. So again, thank you all for your time, for your interest, for your participation in this task force, and we are looking forward to some successful conclusion and recommendations coming out of this task force. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, David, Ross, and Mayor. Next slide, please. Today, as you can see from the people that you see on your screen, the city has brought together residents, maritime property owners, maritime businesses, from high-tech businesses to the working yards, environmentalists. We have Jeff Holland, our river keeper. We have the superintendent for the National Park Service, the Maritime Museum, current and past planning commissioners, Rob Waldman and Dr. Will Scott. And we've got experts who are going to work with us. John Hammond will be working with the property owners on some financial opportunities, may not be the right word, but financial incentives. Leo Wilson and Chris Shine as architects are going to assist us in physically defining a vision for the future. We're coming together as a task force to look at what is our working waterfront. The mayor, Ross, and David have each said it, but basically, what do we need to do to strengthen our maritime industry? How do we keep the water open visually, and how do we access it, which doesn't necessarily mean walking over people's properties. We have Wendy O'Sullivan here to help us look at new ways of accessing the water. And then how do we create a sustainable future for our maritime property owners where they can keep the maritime uses working on their sites and maintain their properties? So it's a delicate balance between the needs of the businesses, the needs of the tenants, the residents, and the owners. And our mission is clear: to craft a clear direction, but most importantly, to come together and reach consensus. a few different people have asked me, well, how will we vote? The goal is that we never have to vote. The goal is that we come together, we identify areas that we think are common themes. We meet together as a task force, and that is how we reach consensus. Next slide, please. So for those of you who are on the city doc, you'll love this slide. This is one of Brennan's classic slides. So you have that circle of blue, that's our task force. We'll be meeting probably about every 6 weeks through the end of May. And the black circles along the bottom, those are our working teams. You will be meeting in one of 3 working teams where you'll be doing surveys, interviewing residents, property owners, research, and all of that information feeds back into the task force. So the teams will do some work, and then that will be fed back at the next meeting to the task force. In terms of updates and work sessions, this is a comprehensive plan amendment. And as such, we will be having work sessions with the Planning Commission. They're in the bright orange. And we also will be updating the City Council and the Rules Committee. And throughout all of this, there will be opportunity, public opportunity for input from the community, but as importantly, the working teams are going to have focus groups, and we are going to figure out ways to hear from residents, hear from other owners, hear from the rest of the industry, so that there is broad-based input and hopefully support. Next slide, please. When we look at the maritime industry, the history of it really goes back into the early 80s. There was tremendous pressure on the waterfront in the 80s. The city marina had just been built. Tecumseh was there for quite a while, but there was a feeling from the residents that their waterfront, their views through what used to be working yards, were now being walled off. At the same time, this new investment was increasing the value of the land, making it almost impossible for the working maritime industry to compete with condominiums or hotels. This is what brought the maritime zoning districts, brought that issue to the forefront. The specific project was the Maritime Hotel. If any of you remember Mr. Leonard, Dr. Leonard's Maritime Hotel, which was on the site of what is now the Annapolis Yacht Club. Next slide, please. So out of this came the Maritime Strategy. Thanks very much, Julian. And the objective of the Maritime Strategy was, it was an economic objective. How do we keep land for our maritime, working maritime boat yards, these land intensive uses, and keep competing uses such as office uses out of that land so the prices aren't going sky high? And how do we keep incompatible uses such as condominiums and residential uses completely off the land, because those uses and their conflicts were causing additional challenges for our working yards. A good example is Yacht Haven, where, because it's nestled in between residential uses, early on, people would buy property in the residential use and then complain that they've got a boatyard next to them. So that was the thinking behind these districts. There were 4 separate districts set up based on providing the maximum amount of land possible, like WMI district on Back Creek for the maritime uses, dealing with what was actually there, like the city dock and the EASTPORT districts, looking at the configuration of the sites and looking at the existing uses. Next slide, please. The WMC is by far the most flexible of all of the uses. It's a relatively small district. It's 17 and a half acres, 141 parcels. And as you're all aware, there's a hotel, a restaurant, fleet reserve, what used to be, what is now 110 Compromise Street, and used to be Faucets, and name went out of my mind for a second, I apologize. It used to be Faucets, and then, you know, working around the entire city dock. This area is the most flexible. There's retail, 40% maritime, the least amount of maritime. But the emphasis here is you can do other things if you provide a public walkway. 110 Compromise is a good example with their public walkway immediately adjacent to the water. The next zone, next please, Julian, is the WMM, Mixed Maritime District. This is a very complex district. And again, the district reflects much of what was there in 1987. 141 parcels. Actually, I gave you the wrong number for the other one. I said 8, it should have been 8 acres and 16 parcels. The WMM is 141 parcels and 17 acres. You've got the City Marina, the Yacht Club, Pier 4, Chesapeake Bay Trust, Yacht Haven, the Templeton Maritime Complex. In this district, it is 70% maritime. And the trigger for non-maritime uses such as office, the trigger is having, and Yacht Haven again is a good example, a working yard, 20,000 square foot yard, or as the Templeton site has, 20,000 square feet of on-land boat storage and a 30-ton lift. In exchange for that, there are provisions for restaurant use as well as non-maritime. Next district, which is WME. WME is located on, is located in 3 different places. It's 146 parcels, 27 acres, and its intent is working maritime. There really is, other than a limited 1,000 square foot deli or a 2,000 square foot restaurant in conjunction with a boatyard and lift as triggers, it is really intended for maritime. One of the sites on First Street is the site of the Eastport Yacht Club, as well as the Severn Sailing Association. We also have, going on the other side of the bridge from 6th Street, we have a combination of what used to be Sarles and Petrini Yacht Yard, which is now South Annapolis Yacht Center. We also have the activity center for the Yacht Club, as well as an older condominium building. If you go to Back Creek, what was originally McNasby's is now the Maritime Museum. We have the Eastport Yacht Center, the Crane Building, the former FAR building. So you have 3 different locations. And again, tight sites, tight configuration, but all working maritime. Next slide, please. This is the Maritime Industrial District. It is by far the most land-intensive district in the city. 60 acres with some of the parcels ranging from 17 to 20 acres, 40 parcels altogether. The intention here is this, as well as the other side of Back Creek and Eastport, is the heart of our working maritime. We've got sites like Jabin's Boatyard, Port Annapolis, Hartman's Marina. The clear intention of this district was to limit competing uses, so the land, to keep the land values where they were, buffer adjacent residential uses. So in addition to the working maritime, you also have marinas such as Port Annapolis and the support facilities, pools, showers, small delicatessen use. So those are our 4 districts that we're looking at. Very different challenges. Next slide, please. These districts, as the city manager has pointed out, have served the city well over the past 30 years. They've kept our waterfront open. They've supported and kept our industry here. And there have been a lot of studies looking at the industry during the years, 2 economic studies, a maritime preservation analysis, a demand and supply of recreational boating study, most recently the Blue Technology study, and of course the City Dock Action Committee plan, which is now, as David indicated, in the process of actually being built. So with that background, I am going to turn this over to Susan Zellers and Stephen Rice to talk about the industry and its contributions. And I have a quick question before I turn it over. Is Archie Trader here on the call? If he is, just give me a holler. Thank you. Susan?
Can I have the next slide? So the maritime districts obviously have served us very well over the years and to support a very strong industry. I've put some statistics here for you. In 21401 and 21403, we register about 7,800 boats, and about 15% of those are sailboats. Anne Arundel County registers more than any other county in Maryland. Also within the 21401 and 21403, 54% of the boats are under 20 feet. So you see that majority of them are smaller boats. So when we're talking about the uses where these marinas are, we're talking about 30% are 20 to 30 feet, 13% over 30 feet, and only 33% are over 40 feet. According to the 2008 study, the destination marinas in the city contribute 3.2 million in total sales, 1.8 million value added, and about 40 jobs in each of the locations. The cluster of maritime businesses in the presence of the Annapolis boat shows are big contributors to why there's such a positive economic engine here within our marine industry. Since the founding of these districts, there's been a lot of outside pressures that have impacted the bottom line to this industry. Environmental impacts, critical area restrictions. We now have a general discharge permit for discharging into states' waters that is specific to the marinas and boatyards. With that, they've had to capture their water before they can either retreat it and use it to wash boats again, or before it can be discharged, depending on what's inside the water. Those things are very expensive to install. I'm sure Rod can tell you exactly how much they are, but they're very expensive to install, and all of the boatyards have had to comply with the general discharge permit and wash water recycling systems. They also have volatile organic chemical regulations, VOC regulations from the EPA to comply with the Clean Air Act, meaning every can of paint that gets opened in their boatyard, they have to document what its VOC content is and to regulate as a result of that. They also have a lot of recycling requirements. We have a great shrink wrap recycling program. It's the thing we all love to hate because it's very difficult to do it right, but it costs money to do that. And our boatyards and marinas all do their best on that as well. So with those increasing costs, we also obviously have rising insurance costs, flood and hurricane premium changes over the last several years, and of course, property taxes. So these pressures, along with the strong maritime industry, bring us to the point of where we are now, evaluating how we can make sure that we make some small changes in the maritime zoning that'll give these maritime property owners and their tenants the support they need to make sure that hauling a boat and repairing a boat and painting a boat and selling a boat can still be done here in Annapolis. We need to all work together to make sure that we answer both sides of this, making the property owners happy that there's maritime there, making the residents happy, and making the tenants happy as well. So we're all here in the spirit of compromise. I look forward to working with everyone as we come up with the best solution for moving forward. Stephen?
Next slide, please.
Okay. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the economic impact of the maritime industry, on the city, and talk about exactly what's happening in present day, the direct impact of the industry to the city bottom line. So back in 1986, and all these studies were commissioned obviously by the city. The 1986 Maritime study said that the Annapolis is essentially a maritime trades shopping center. It identified roughly 200 maritime businesses with 1,500 employees. In 2009, the Maritime study essentially found 3,000 boat slips, and the study said that the industry within Annapolis had a value of $1 billion. Now, that might actually sound like a lot of money, but the components of that $1 billion include the following: boat builders, boat dealers, yacht brokerages, naval architects, engine mechanics, yacht carpenters, cabinet makers, fiberglass fabricators, marine welders, riggers, sail makers, painters, finishers, and navigation instrument technicians. In 2013, the Maritime study found that Annapolis represents 15% of Maryland's overall maritime business and 24% of the state's boat building business. Similar to 1986, there were 242 maritime-based businesses in the city, and actually over 2,800 employees, although many of those employees were part-time. And just this year, our city Department of Finance did an analysis, and they found that the 4 maritime districts that Eileen just talked through provide a total of $2,437,627 in property tax revenue to the city's operating budget. And that represents nearly 2% of the city's total operating revenue, which gets directly to the city's bottom line. So all this to say, the economic impact of the maritime industry on the city is significant. And the maritime industry plays a very important role in the city being able to have the resources it needs to operate. Thank you.
Stephen, thank you so much. For people who do not know, Stephen Rice is the Chief of Economic Development for the city, and Susan Zellers, of course, is the Director for the Marine Trades Association. With that, I'd like to go to the next slide and have Rod Jabin talk to all of you a little bit about the challenges facing the industry today. Rod?
Well, thank you, Eileen. I think as we've heard already today, it's exceedingly complicated with multiple zones and multiple needs. What my problems are in the WMI are very different than what the WMM requires, and very different from what WME requires. So there's been years and years of studies. There's been stacks and stacks of reports and sector studies, but I think without rehashing it, what's most encouraging at this point is that we've assembled the correct balance of stakeholders so that we can get together and come up with some carefully considered responses to what the issues are right now as the maritime industry in Annapolis has evolved and the needs have evolved very differently today than they were in 1987. So without rehashing everything that's been said before me, I think we're off to a great start, and it really is going to be powerful when we get to where we can build consensus and a common theme from all the different areas on what is going to make them successful for the next, bunch of years. I don't know what that is. You know, I know what would make, you know, would help the folks in WMI, but it's very different than WMM. So at the end of all this, we have a real opportunity here to affect change that will benefit the entire group. And I'm looking forward to that.
Well, thanks so much. And I would like, last but definitely not least, I'd like to go to the next slide. And actually, you can move it forward 2 slides, Julian, to Wendy O'Sullivan, who is the superintendent for the Chesapeake Bay National Park Service. And she's going to lay out an opportunity for us. Thank you very much, Wendy.
Thanks. Again, hello, good afternoon, Wendy O'Sullivan. I'm with the National Park Service. We have an office in Annapolis, and I want to start by saying how sorry I am that the federal government is picking up and moving out of City Marina. I started about a year ago, and that decision predates me by some time. I've been with the National Park Service for coming up on 25 years. I started my career at Biscayne National Park in South Florida, which is a maritime national park. And I'm from a big Irish family, and I would wish I could turn the clock back, because I think my stubborn Irishness that's water focused could have been an asset to stop the decision by GSA to move us out of City Marina. So although I can't turn the clock back, I am very happy to be here leading the NPS and the Chesapeake, and that our home will remain Annapolis. And I hope to share with you sort of some exciting opportunities on the horizon. This slide just shows that our responsibilities for the Park Service are for the entire Chesapeake watershed that runs all the way up from Cooperstown, New York, down through the Virginia Tidewater. And this circle here with all the vibrant images shows that we really are working. It's sort of a communities across the watershed in all the special places, and looking to knit those together to tell the full Chesapeake story. And these topics that run around the ring there are our focus areas. We are about people and stories and places, the authenticness that is the Chesapeake. And we are about driving visitation and recreation, and so the economics of that. We have a big focus on diversity and inclusion and making sure there's equitable access to our special places. And then because we are the MPS, of course, we're grounded in conservation and education and creating stewards for the future. Next slide. And
Julian, let me make sure Julian gets the next slide up.
No problem. I'm going to run through some examples of recent dollars that we're bringing in particular for the Chesapeake. So our every year we receive funding that's part of what's called the Chesapeake Bay Gateways program. And the next slide shows some of our recent projects that we've done here in Annapolis. And to get a sense of these projects, to think about on scale, we're doing these sort of efforts all across the watershed. But we did provide some funding to Historic Annapolis to help with the costs associated with the city dock consensus planning. We also provided a grant to help with their 99 Main Street new big exhibit that's going to be happening. We're proud to be a partner of that. If some of you have been down to City Dock, you'll see that the signs that have been old and faded of the waysides down at City Dock were just refreshed, and so that was NPS funds. We're proud to support some dollars to help with the Back Creek project with the boardwalk and the dock there. And then we do have partnerships that we do with other organizations, not always just place-based. Like, for example, we do a program with the Maryland Office of Tourism called Chesapeake Storytellers, where we bring in, we did 3 big classes this year to train water tour operators, watermen and waterwomen, and other tour operators on telling the stories of the Chesapeake, on interpretive skills, so that in particular for watermen or fishing boat operators that are looking to sort of broaden their offerings, they have the skills to really draw in maybe new clients and round out their offerings. Next slide. And but the big exciting thing that I want to talk about, which is a focus for our office, is this concept of not just being in single individual places, but to think about a community scale. Next slide. And we are looking to create what is being considered the Chesapeake Gateway's communities. And we're starting here in Annapolis, both because it is the heart of the Bay, it's our home, and it's the signature sort of launching point for really telling all these different layers of the connection to the Chesapeake. And so been working with the mayor and his team in entering into an agreement that will be an opportunity to position and provide support for Annapolis to be positioned as a Chesapeake Gateway community. Next slide. The signature project for this is the Burtis House. And I know many of you have been sort of watching the Burtis House over the years, and it has gone through sort of ups and downs, and the exciting news is it's about to go up. And what I mean by up is we've done a feasibility study to show that we can save it and it can be lifted up out of the king tides. And we are excited to partner with the city, and we're looking to continue to send NPS funds to stabilize it, bring it up to the same level that the rest of City Dock will rise up to, and really work with the community on a vision for it to be adaptively reused as a major sort of gateway to the Bay. Next slide. Along with that, we're also partnering with the city and moved some grant dollars to Historic Annapolis to look at the community scale and develop a visitation plan, and what we call interpretive master planning, where you look at all of the entry points and all of the themes and layers of how the public and local residents can interact with all these different themes that Annapolis offers. So this is just a snapshot that is, each color is a different theme, and we just have a pull down here to show the sort of the maritime history is one of the major themes. Maritime industry is one of the major themes that we are looking at and working with partners to develop. And it really does mean that it's really working on both sides of Back Creek, Spa Creek, even this doesn't show it, but even trying to look up all the way up to College Creek as well. Next slide. But the orientation that I'd like to just convey is NPS does see itself as being a long-term partner in Annapolis. Someday we can picture a Burtis House being revived, maybe added onto, so there's a bigger footprint and bigger engagement. We picture it being our sort of front door to the Bay. This is a photo that we've mocked up. And so I hope the mayor and the city folks are okay with that. We put the arrowhead on mock-up, so maybe it's a little premature, but we do see this really vibrant opportunity here. And because of my background being sort of connected with water, and I went and found the National Park Service has a banner flag that maybe has more military origins, but to me it looks like a burgee. So I'm already starting to think about sort of the positioning and branding to really sort of have a maritime focus for the Park Service in Annapolis. Next slide. So the other big piece to share with you all is there is potential for a new national park for the Chesapeake, where Annapolis would be sort of home base of that. Next slide. There is congressional interest in creating what's known in the National Park Service as a national recreation area. For over 30 years, there's been thoughts and talk about creating a national park for the Chesapeake, and it just has really never had the right timing, the right place, the right thought process of what it could be, because the Chesapeake is so huge. But it is the only major national treasure in America that does not have sort of that level of designation. And because of the opportunity with the Burtis House, there's a opportunity sort of for the first flag to be in the ground at Burtis, but then going through a process with the community and thinking big about, are there other locations in the vicinity of Annapolis? And then the vision for this new national park unit is for it to be a partnership park through and through, to look around the full bay and identify the existing state parks, the existing wildlife refuges, and national parks. You've got Fort McHenry just up in Baltimore that could be partnered together to make up what would be a new national recreation area. But all along, the congressional leaders that are thinking about this concept are the Maryland delegation, and so they really do have Annapolis sort of at the heart of all of the sort of concepts. We are seeing momentum around this, and both Governor Hogan and Northrop have sent letters of support into both their Virginia and Maryland delegations. And so we'll see what happens. It's an exciting opportunity, but either way, next slide, I really do think there's just remarkable opportunities for the Chesapeake and Annapolis, and the Park Service is excited to be part of it. One of the things I'll share with you all before you go into your breakouts to think about is the authorities I have related to the Chesapeake and the funding that I have as financial assistance. The language back in 1998 when our program was created includes a line that has never really been activated, that I think has a lot of potential, and that is, it says, I can provide technical and financial assistance and partner with not just the regulars that MPS does, which would be other federal, state, or nonprofit organizations. It uses a phrase that says, and the private sector. And so that phrase, and the private sector, is something that for the 20 years up until now, we really haven't investigated, activated. And I'm here to say, I'm ready to think broadly about what that means and what the opportunities are there for that. So next slide just has my contact information, and I really look forward to seeing where this task force heads and how the MPS can be value added.
Well, Wendy, you're so terrific. Thank you so much. And I think you can all see why, with the interest in having access to the water, what a tremendous opportunity we have as we enter into this effort to partner with the Park Service. And we also, the mayor has asked, he asked this week if we could also look at some efforts to deal with resiliency, particularly in EASTPORT, and we will be doing that as well. Thank you, Wendy.
And Eileen, and if we just mentioned this, the Golden Gate program in San Francisco was driven through the National Park Service and Department of Defense, and they pulled all the pieces together to make, you know, what is one of the most famous things, visited sites in the world. And, you know, we have an amazing Chesapeake Bay Bridge, which is an engineering feat that I don't think is fully appreciated. So creating connectivity between all these assets that we're lucky to be around will be a fantastic achievement.
I agree. Thank you, Mayor. Looking at the model of San Francisco is definitely something we're also, really want to take advantage of, and how they did knit together, existing federal lands with city lands, with even something like other state parks. So I think there's, if I could have put wish list pins on the map from Berta's house on, there's just great opportunities.
Well, thank you. As we go to the next slide, you're going to be able to take these exciting thoughts from the mayor and from Wendy and use them as you break out into your 3 teams. And each team has got the same set of questions. What's your number 1 priority for participating? What actions would you like to see to help the maritime businesses? How do you use the waterfront? And that includes, think about all the things you enjoy. Restaurants, the obvious on-water sports. But there are a lot of ways for the rest of our community to use the waterfront. And what possibilities do you envision for the future of the waterfront? So with that, Julian, I'm turning this over to you to put everyone in their 3 breakout rooms. And then those of us who wander will wander.
The next one? Oh,
the breakout rooms.
Okay, you should.
Is everyone in their breakout room?
Yeah, so, so now.
Is it? No, I don't see it.
No, we don't have it. We've got participants, share screen, record. We don't have those 4 boxes for the breakout rooms. Hey, John.
Hey, how we doing?
Well, we're doing pretty well, I hope. I don't see it.
Is it possible to get a copy of the slideshow?
Yes, I'll send it to you.
And me too, please. This is really fabulous, Eileen.
Well, we need to thank Julian and Wendy and the mayor and all these people, and Sally and Eric. They did all the heavy lifting. I do the herding.
Meow.
Meow.
I know I have the brand marks.
Let me move you guys to rooms and see.
So in theory, this is Julian is yesterday when we did a dry run, we could go into whatever room we want, but we may be here just talking to each other. So if that is the case,
are there facilitators in each of the rooms to help them answer their questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Hopefully, and that's why I want to go into the rooms and make sure.
How can a maritime study happen?
A what?
Patuxent.
Oh, Patuxent. And Julian, it may make the most sense to have, because people are going to be each speaking, so it may make the most sense rather than to confuse it with an image. We'll wait till the image till the very end and let people speak. Welcome back. Succeeded. Why don't we start with Mike Tomasini and Vic Pasco? Would you guys like to share what your group talked about?
Hold on one second, Eileen, because I may die in the middle of this discussion, but we had a pretty robust discussion. If I drop off, maybe Vic can pick up where I left off. But
okay.
I took a bunch of notes. We've got a good group of really smart people, and I thank you for everybody for having a pretty good discussion. We've got Vic, who comes at it more from a resident's point of view, which is good. Kind of balancing the needs of the businesses in these maritime communities and the residential nature that surrounds them is really important. John Harrison, who obviously knows this system and the zones fairly well, gave us a really good broad background of what types of uses are currently allowed, how you can get additional non-maritime space on your properties. We had a lot of questions from Bob, just kind of Bob Waldman bringing himself up to speed on, what are the restrictions in the zones? How is it making property owners suffer? And what are the negative consequences of changing that? We talked about some of the triggers that exist for if you have this, you are allowed to do this, and the percentages of businesses. There was some talk that maybe the city could provide us with some information on vacancy rates within the maritime zones as it compares to the city. And then Debbie Goslin, who is owner of the marina on Back Creek, she has very little demand right now for maritime businesses at her properties. So we kind of balanced all that. I think some of the fear from the maritime tenants is that if you open this up to outside non-maritime tenants, that they could be driven out by price. And that's not anything that seems like everybody wants, but a flexibility of uses and the tricky part on how to balance that is really important. So I think that's the basis of our discussion.
You covered it all. You guys covered it all in a nutshell.
And I thought fast enough that my computer didn't die.
Terrific. Why don't I go to Susan next?
Unmute. So I had a great group as well. Unfortunately, we didn't have any residents with us. So we did do our best to cover what they might be thinking. Anyways, across the board, everyone agrees to keep the maritime focus, but to somehow figure out how to balance that and allow owners to continue to be able to invest in their property, to be able to put the money into that. So how do we balance that? Restaurants were suggested, restaurants and an outside bar, potentially more seating in the summer than the winter. Streamline permitting, City of Annapolis, make it easier to get these permits so that people can turn these things around. And as far as how to keep that maritime, if you start to open up anything, I mean, boat dealerships are leaving en masse for the Eastern Shore. It's harder and harder to pay the Annapolis rents. How do we keep the boat dealerships here? Because with the boat dealerships, of course, come the boat shopping and all the businesses and all of the things that are used, to commission a boat and that sort of thing. So keeping our yards working and making sure that they're able to keep functioning. We also had we are talking about what's dependent on water because we didn't have residents. Basically, our folks are all very dependent on the water. They're all businesses and that, but we did talk about those that don't have to be right along the water's edge. We talked about there being more access and more opportunities for people to get out on the water and making that easier. And we talked about how we need to publicize a little bit better what great stewards of the water our maritime industry is, based on some of the things that I talked about before we started and some of the things that our yards do for the environment. Let's, kind of promote that a little bit. Actions to strengthen so that there is the opportunity to allow owners to continue to be able to invest, again, would be the restaurants with potentially some transient docking at them. Allowing special event venues, wedding venues, other kinds of special events, and looking at how to tweak some of the non-maritime offices. Some, people do challenge to be able to rent those, some of their spaces, some of them, rent very easily to the maritime. And everyone sort of talked about how challenging it is to allow too much maritime to be able not to be there. So if you allow too much non-maritime, you're going to have issues with losing the entire maritime industry. So the number one thing we all agreed on, it's all about balance. And that's it.
Well, terrific. You guys have been doing an amazing job. I am now going to turn it over to Rod and Will.
Rod.
Thanks, Eileen. Thanks, Will. I think I'd like to echo Susan's comment, which it is all about balance. And you quickly discover that the needs are very diverse in the various zones. But in general, I think we didn't get through all of the questions and everything else, but the most important thing that came out of our brief discussion was we have to preserve the brand that we've created here in Annapolis. To use a term that Debbie Gosling coined, the brand is the maritime atmosphere that you get when you drive into Spa Creek for the first time. And we have to preserve that. And that's the reason why all of us are here. And when we leave for a couple of weeks, we are kind of wanting to return to what we find is our little Annapolis, which is very different than DC or Fort Lauderdale or Newport or anything else. And so the challenges are exactly that. How do we preserve that setting while making sure that the tenants are going to be successful in an ever increasing land values and stuff? And we have a great example with John Norton Annapolis Harbor Boatyard, where he's the lone survivor on Spot Creek. And how do we create a strategy that allows him to continue to stay in business there on a very important piece of property? And how do we balance the non-maritime uses that are so sorely needed? How do we expand that? And when we've seen that challenge at Annapolis City Marina, Debbie talked about it at Annapolis Landing, and certainly Clarence has the same thing, where they have a lot of structure there that demand tenants, and everybody's struggling for tenants. And what do we do, and what is the right balance? But overlying all of that is this concept of maintaining the integrity of our brand. And there's a lot of, easy knee-jerk reactions to what we can do to make everything better, but we really haven't got into that yet. That's in the next couple of discussions where the hard decisions will have to be made.
Well, you all amaze me, because each group, and we tried to put a mix of people to make sure we would have a good conversation with each group, but each group really got to the heart of our challenge. Let me ask if the city manager or Ross, if you have any comments, and then I'm going to take everybody to what our next steps will be.
The only comment I would make is, like you, Eileen, I'm quite enthused. I stuck with one group and watched it through, because I think that's where a lot of legislative action is going to occur. I am very encouraged. We're getting off to a wonderful start, and I hope we can maintain that momentum.
Terrific. David?
Yeah, I would just sort of second what Ross said. I bounced between the meeting rooms, and it was great discussions in each one, and it never lagged. It just kept going. It was very lively. So thanks for participating and for being part of this. This is great.
Well, thank all of you. What we'll be doing next, you'll be hearing from us right after Thanksgiving. We've got 3 teams. We're going to just take a look to make sure that we've got an equal balance. We have specific assignments for each of the teams in December, where you'll have opportunity or challenge, depending on how you look at it, to interview property owners, interview restaurants, interview residents, as well as interview many of the people in the maritime industry. So we will be contacting you right after Thanksgiving, and we will be getting, I'll be working with the team co-chairs, but we will be getting each of the group together, each of the 3 groups together by a Zoom call. And we hope to do that the first week in December. So thank you so much. It's been terrific. And anybody else want to give a shout out before Julian takes us offline?
Eileen, can we get a list, an email list, or attendee list of some sort?
Sure. We had a few people that we were waiting for final confirmation on. So we'll get a list of, each group has their list of their own team, but we will get a list of the members, the working team members, and then the ex officio members and the experts. So we will get that out to you within a week, I would say within a week or so.
Hey, thanks. That'd be very helpful.
Take care. And thank you all. Terrific start.